The Lincoln-Douglas debates were a series of 7 joint discussions between Abraham Lincoln, a Republican, and Stephen Douglas, a Democrat. They were held during the summer and fall of 1858 throughout the state of Illinois. Lincoln and Douglas had been debating each other for more than 20 years before their famous contest for the U.S. Senate in 1858. They were longtime rivals with contrasting styles and sharp differences in philosophy, but from the beginning, almost everyone realized that the 1858 debates would be historic. The political environment in the 1850s was exceptionally tense because of the debate over slavery. Lincoln represented a new party, the Republicans, who believed in free soil for Western territories, meaning the containment of slavery within the South. Democrats were divided over the question, but Douglas believed that Westerners should decide for themselves whether or not to allow slavery. This stance was known as popular sovereignty. Douglas's support of popular sovereignty found him at odds with leaders of his own party. In late 1857, President James Buchanan endorsed a pro-slavery constitution for Kansas, but Douglas refused to go along. This rupture between leading Democrats shocked the nation's political community. Some Republicans, such as newspaper editor Horace Greeley, saw the rupture as an opportunity for the Republican Party. Greeley openly discussed accepting Douglas into the Republican Party, but others, like Abraham Lincoln, objected. In fact, many Republicans were troubled by the idea of Douglas as their new standard-bearer, and they resisted Greeley's suggestion. On June 16, 1858, the Republican Convention, meeting at the State House in Springfield, endorsed former Congressman Lincoln as their first and only choice for U.S. Senate. The endorsement of Lincoln was unprecedented. State legislatures were responsible for selecting U.S. senators, and there was no tradition of convention nominations or popular senatorial campaigns. Whatever campaign did take place in 1858 would have to be an indirect one. Lincoln responded to his party's endorsement with a startling prediction. A house divided against itself cannot stand. This warning was, of course, a reference to the nation's division over slavery. Lincoln invoked this biblical phrase before, but never under such scrutiny and never with such electrifying impact. The campaign began in June with unmatched intensity. Lincoln suggested as many as 50 debates. Annoyed but unintimidated, Douglas agreed to what he called 7 joint discussions. The first debate occurred in Ottawa on August 21st. The town's population literally doubled overnight as more than 10,000 people arrived to hear the candidates. Banners were everywhere. The diverse crowd strained to hear the open-air debate, and newspapers paid shorthand reporters to take down every word, and then wired reports across the country. After the first debate, Lincoln admitted, the fire flew some. Douglas had been on the attack, accusing his opponent of various sins, especially for being too radical on the slavery question, a charge that Lincoln struggled to deny. However, a week later in Freeport, Lincoln appeared stronger, putting Douglas on the defensive with questions about his views on slavery. By the Jonesboro encounter in mid-September, a pattern was clear. Even though Illinois had no slaves, the 1858 debates focused exclusively on the fate of slavery. Douglas argued that white people should decide for themselves whether or not to allow slavery, while Lincoln claimed that slavery was immoral and should eventually be abolished. The challenge for Lincoln was to explain what would happen after slavery was extinguished. Douglas knew that most whites feared this prospect and pressed Lincoln repeatedly. He even made sneering references to Frederick Douglass, the famed abolitionist and former slave. At Charleston, Lincoln conceded that he was not yet ready to commit to a full political or social equality. A young girl who attended the 5th debate at Knox College in Galesburg later recalled that while Douglas was losing his voice by this stage, Lincoln still rang out as clear as a bell. Lincoln was in good spirits, reportedly joking as they marched through Old Main at Knox College. Well, at last I've gone through college. The Quincy debate witnessed Lincoln at his most aggressive, as he accused Douglas of ducking and lying and even of forgery in his use of documents. The senator responded by claiming that his opponent had indulged in gross personalities and false charges. It was mid-October, and the close contest had reached its nastiest point. Douglas led off the final debate by highlighting his independence and claiming that Lincoln's House-divided doctrine was a slander upon the immortal framers of our Constitution. He predicted national destruction if the Republicans prevailed. Lincoln replied by arguing that the real issue of the contest was the eternal struggle between right and wrong. Nobody knows for sure what impact the great debates had on the 1858 Illinois elections. Republicans won the majority of the popular votes in the legislative contest, but since not all legislators were up for re-election, and because the apportionment of seats was imperfect, Democrats retained control of the General Assembly and succeeded in re-electing Douglas. Many observers describe the results as a tremendous personal victory for Douglas, because he had not only defeated Lincoln, but also challenged a sitting president from his own party. Lincoln, on the other hand, saw the deepening divisions among Democrats as a good sign for Republicans. "The question is not half settled," he assured friends after the contest. Lincoln's optimism after the 1858 campaign soon appeared justified. Despite losing the election to Douglas, the Springfield attorney was invited in 1859 to give campaign speeches in 5 different northern states and territories, and received what Lincoln called his highest compliment, a request to publish the text of the debates by political friends in Ohio. Lincoln and Douglas faced each other again in 1860 as presidential candidates, though in this contest they had no debates and were joined by 2 other contenders, John Breckinridge and John Bell. The result was another close election, but this time with a much different result. Lincoln and the Republicans prevailed, secession began, and the nation lurched toward war. This documentary short was created by David Park and was adapted from an exhibit produced by the Gilder Lehrman Institute for American History and the House Divided Project at Dickinson College. The software engine used to create this documentary was Microsoft Photostory 3. Special thanks for use of images is due to the following: the Gilder Lehrman Institute for American History, the House Divided Project at Dickinson College, LincolnNet, and HarpWeek Explore History.